Let us start a new topic where we'll look at the third key economic variable or indicator, and that is prices in an economy. To appreciate the role of prices in our daily life, look at an extreme example of Germany between 1918 to 1923. 1 ounce of gold costed about 1 mark in 1918. The same ounce of gold costed 100 marks in 1922. So in 4 years time period, it had increased 100 times. And then between 1922 to 23, the same ounce of gold which costed 100 marks in 1922 now costed over 1,000,000 marks in 1923. Now just substitute an example of coffee, and suppose in the first day coffee costed say $1, and within 4 years the same cup of coffee cost $100, and within 1 year or less than 1 year the same cup of coffee cost $1,000,000. So if you see rise in prices like this, life is going to be very difficult, and so we need to understand the role of prices. You must have heard of this term inflation, and when we use the term inflation, what it refers to is a general rise in prices. And when we say general, it means we are looking at a number of commodities and we see an increase in prices. The opposite of inflation is deflation, and deflation refers to a decline, a general decline in prices. Inflation happens most of the times. Deflation is a rare phenomena. Another term you must have heard is inflation rate. An inflation rate refers to percent change in prices, and this is how we measure it. Let's abbreviate inflation rate as IR, and this equals pin C minus pin B, or the difference between these two, divided by pin B, and this whole expression times 100. And when we use the term pin C is price index number in the current or the latest year for which the data is available. Pin B refers to price index number in the base or the previous year for which the data is available. Now, what is price index number? It's a number which indicates average level of prices for several commodities. So this is how we calculate inflation rate, and we'll also go through an example where we calculate inflation rate. Before we get into an example of how we calculate inflation rate, let us look at different types of price index numbers that an economy may have. And the first one, which is very popular, is Consumer Price Index, abbreviated as CPI. And this is supposed to refer to average of prices relevant to a typical consumer. What the government agency does is it looks at a typical American consumer, looks at the consumption basket, how many fruits he buys, how much meat he buys, and so on. And then based on the consumption basket or the different goods this person buys, they look at the prices, and based on the prices they calculate a weighted average of prices relevant to a typical consumer. The second important price index number used in a country is Producer Price Index, abbreviated as PPI, and this is just the average of prices relevant to a typical consumer. So here we are looking at from a business perspective rather than from the consumer perspective. The third type of price index number we use is called the GDP deflator, and GDP deflator is essentially the average of prices of all goods and services included in GDP. So in terms of coverage, GDP deflator is going to be very comprehensive. So these are three examples of price index numbers that are used in different countries. Let us work through an example of calculating inflation rate. And suppose CPI, which is Consumer Price Index, was 200 in 2016 and the same price index, consumer price index or CPI, is 215 in 2017. What is the inflation rate in 2017? So we know the formula for inflation rate, and this is given by this expression. And what is pin C? It refers to price index number in the current year. The current year for us is 2017. Pin B refers to price index number in the base year, and the base year for us is 2016. So we just plug in these numbers and we solve for it, and what we get is inflation rate of 25%. And this is how inflation rate is calculated, and what it tells us is prices rose by 25% in 2017 as compared to 2016. This chart shows inflation rate in the US from way back in 1960s or earlier to beyond 2010, and the inflation rate in the US in the initial part was about less than 2.5%, and then by 1970s, some middle of 1970s, it shot up to about 12.5%. Around 1980s, it shot up to 15%, and then it started to decline. So for most part, the average price or inflation in the US has been around 2 to 3%. And in certain years, we have seen extremes where it could go up to as high as 15%. So this is how inflation rate looks like for the US. By now, you must have guessed the reason as to why we study prices is to figure out the impact it has on purchasing power of the money we have. And let us look at a very simple example to appreciate purchasing power. Suppose you make an income, I stands for income, of $10 a week, and the only thing you buy with your income is apples, and you spend your entire income on apples. You don't save any money, you do not borrow any money. And suppose your income that you receive is $10 and the price of an apple is $1. What is the maximum quantity of apples you can buy with this purchase? It will obviously be 10 apples. And this 10 apples that you can buy in a way reflects purchasing power of apples. Look at another example. Now suppose, as compared to the first situation, your income has increased to $20, but at the same time prices have doubled and the price of an apple has become $2. Your income has doubled, price of an apple has doubled. So what is the max quantity of apples you can buy? It will be the same as in the first case, which will be 10 apples. So you can still purchase the same amount of apples even though the income that you receive has doubled. The third situation we have is, suppose income stays the same as we had in situation 1, but price of an apple doubles. Now what happens? What is the max quantity of apples you can buy? It will be 5. So when your income stays the same and price of something increases, you can buy less with the same income that you receive. In the previous slide, you saw an example where in situation 1, this person received income of $10 per week. This income that you receive as in dollars is called nominal income. And then we calculated, based on prices and nominal income, what is the max quantity of apples this person could buy, and that reflects the purchasing power of your income or your money, and that is referred to as real income. So what is real income? Real income is nominal income that is adjusted for price level, and this is how it reflects purchasing power. Now when you are using price index number, we need a formula to determine real income, and here is the formula. Real income equals nominal income divided by price index number, and this whole expression times 100 gives us real income. So we know the formula to calculate real income, and once again this is nominal income divided by price index number, and this ratio times 100. Consider the following example. Suppose the income that I received in 2010 was $10,000, and in 2017 my income became 10 times and I received $100,000. The CPI in 2010 was 200 and CPI in 2017 is 2500. The question we ask is, am I better off today as compared to earlier time, which is 2010, based on what I can afford or what I can buy? And what we do is we calculate real income for each of the 2 years. So real income in 2010 will be excuse me, my nominal income, which is 10,000, divided by the price index number, which is CPI, and this was 200 in 2010, and this ratio times 100 gives me 5,000. What is my real income in 2017? $100,000 divided by the price index number, which is 2500, and this expression times 100 gives me 4,000. So what we realize is, once we adjust for prices, my real income, or what my income can buy in 2017, is less than what it could buy in 2010, though in nominal terms my income increased 10 times. So this is how we use prices to determine purchasing power of income or real income. The last area for us to cover in terms of this topic for this course is types of inflation. And we distinguish between what is called demand pull inflation, inflation which is caused by factors on the demand side. Suppose our incomes increase and we start buying more, that may create pressure for prices to increase. And this has to be compared to what we call cost push inflation. This inflation is caused by factors on the cost side. It is entirely possible that the wages have increased, and that would impact cost of producing it, or the prices of inputs or raw materials has increased, and that may cause cost push inflation. So there are two types of inflation, demand pull and cost push inflation. And this completes our discussion of role of prices, the third key economic indicator. Thank you for your time.